My name is Sherry Musavi, co-founder and chair of Hamilton Media Guild. On behalf of my oh, there's one. On behalf of my team and myself, I want to welcome you to our first official event, a sold-out event. And as you know, Hamilton Media Guild launched at the end of last year. And we had our launch at Radius Cafe, a full house. And what we want to do is merge media minds. Specifically, we want to connect young, emerging professionals with media experts. Look around you. Do you think we've accomplished this goal tonight? So as you know, the way we tell our stories, or the people who are telling the stories, have changed dramatically over the last many years. And people have been experimenting with media. And so this is the reason we wanted to have our first official event as a panel discussion on doing media differently. We have a stellar lineup of panelists and moderator tonight. And we're so excited to hear their input on how they're doing media differently. And all of this wouldn't have been possible without our amazing sponsors. And you know what? None of this would have been possible without our team. I mean, we're so diverse. We have a team of 5 plus 6. So myself, Margaret Lintodd at the back over there, Alyssa Lay, we have Scott, we have Cassandra, and our amazing mentor, Roger Gillespie. So tonight, please use hashtag HMG different, and let's engage and do media differently. So with that said, I would like to introduce Scott up to introduce our amazing panelist and moderator. Thank you.
Good evening. One more hand for Sherry, everybody. I'm not as classy as the ladies I work with. I couldn't come up here with water. I'm certainly dependent on this. This was a very tough event to plan, and I've been running around for a while, so I'm just going to take a quick step. Our first event was a big one, and we wanted to make sure that, well, all of us come from a background in journalism. As I hope you guys understand, we're going to be covering the whole broad spectrum of media as we go on, but journalism is where we all have our background, so this is a very journalism-oriented event. Our panelists, and we'll start with number 1, is Jamie Smith. You can come up. Jamie Gunner Smith is podcast In the Neighborhood. The video, it has audio. Oh, God. All right. You can take it. Jamie.
Roll that back. Roll it back really quick. Do you not roll that back? Just roll it back for a second. Just give us 1 second, folks. We have some technical difficulties here right now. Oh, our friend is Jamie Gunner Smith. Look at him right there. Hamilton Music Awards. That was from his wedding. He's fat there, and he's fat there. He was diagnosed as diabetic, and for the last 2 months, he's been on a diet losing weight. Great shot of Lister Block. He went to Westdale High School along with Teenage Head and Forgotten Rebels. Started out as a busboy at the old court town, learned to book bands with Suzanne Kavanaugh, and got his face punched in on many occasions. That's why he's from Hamilton. Moving along, this band is actually Lee Harvey Osmond. I had nothing to do with them, but John Cousins was a tour manager and also the Killjoys. There's a picture of Edgefest and some other things that I did as a tour manager throughout the 90s. I'm a graduate of Mohawk College, and I am future ready. There's a microphone and ABFM, the new spirit of radio, is something that I came up with a couple of years ago. Made lots of money, and I don't work there anymore. So moving along in radio, here's a picture I have nothing to do with. I didn't design any of those things. There's me on Twitter with another fat man. There's the fat man, Matt Jelly. The name of the show is In the Neighborhood, not in your neighborhood. You can Google all of those things. Ralph Nader we interview local politicians, we interview local Hamilton icons, and we do all of those wonderful things as a Hamiltonian. And there's my glasses and my brand. And that's Jamie Gunner Smith doing media differently.
Alright, do you guys think you can be as eloquent as Mr. Gunner? Alright. Yeah, I know. Yeah. Alright, we will start the next video. The next one is Martinez Galenzi. You can stand up. Yeah.
It's gonna be half the speed he did. That's my little car. It's really, really small. That's me doing stuff. So I run MJ Media, and it's located in Hamilton. We run a whole bunch of stuff like the Hamilton 24-Hour Film Festival and Urbanicity Magazine. I was born, well, I wasn't born, but I lived in Charlottetown, PEI. Then I moved to Flamborough, who knew they had a flag. Then I went to Calvin College in Grand Rapids, Michigan, and shot a lot of stuff, played a lot of music. That's a 4-manual pipe organ. Then I wore suits and showed up at a lot of events like this. And then I went to Germany, produced some films, traveled to Nicaragua, Peru, a whole bunch of other places around the world doing international media, which is what my company's called MG International. And then as I did more local stuff like the Hamilton 24, we decided to switch it up and became MGI, kind of like there I'm saying this is the new Cultural Olympics. Urbanicity, as we got more and more local, we decided to become MGI Media, kind of like KFC became KFC instead of Kentucky Fried Chicken, because they didn't want to be fried, and we're no longer international. So there are a bunch of pictures. We run bus tours. That's a picture taken in Detroit. We're on bus tours. Next one's coming up to Cleveland, and that's me.
You know, I couldn't have planned this better myself, actually. I think these are better introductory videos than anything. By the way, if you want to see the real introductory videos, they're all on our website, hamiltonmediaguild.net. And so we'll bring up the next one, Matthew Ingram.
I haven't actually seen this video, so that's me talking at a thing, I'm talking at another thing. That's me with my iPad. I don't know if that's Bernardo, that's not me. I've never been to court. I can use a microphone. I live there, the green part. Yeah, I use that thing. Not sure what that's about. Light bulb, yeah. I'm not that old. I used to work there. That's the globe. That's me talking at another thing. That was in Italy. She go there. And that's me on Twitter. Yeah, that's me talking at another thing. Mesh. That was Mesh. Yeah, that was TEDx, I think. Toronto. I'm a little thinner there. That's it. That's it.
Alright, I'll just sum up because apparently I know Matthew better than he knows himself. He did the first TEDx conference in Toronto. We spoke on that. He's been a big supporter of social media ever since the 90s when Paul Bernardo obviously was the Paul Bernardo trial. He got to cover it from the States because they didn't have a litigation ban down there. He worked at the Globe and Mail for a while. And Mesh is a talk show that he started to talk about social media and gadgets and all that great stuff, right? Right on time. All right, May-Marie.
Thank you. Okay, those are hard acts to follow, but I'm going to try. So here we go. That's me chatting at our recently launched talk show, The Chat with Luminescence. And again, another way we're doing media differently. I came to Hamilton, actually, Vere, born in Sierra Leone, Vere, New Jersey, Hamilton, and now Hamilton. So that's why it's predestined. I like to talk, so I'm standing on a mic. I love downtown, I live downtown. That's the Luminescence event that we had in the summer. That's just me and Elisa chatting, and she took a picture of me without realizing it. That was, again, me, my lovely babies, and again, my lovely children. And yeah, pretty much. It's Hamilton, and I also work for the city of Hamilton as an access and equity specialist, and we are an ambitious city, so I am proud of that. And the Luminescence team. So that's it, May-Marie in a nutshell.
Thank you very much, May-Marie. So our final panelist is Ryan McGreal, and Ryan McGreal and I actually had a pretty interesting Twitter conversation this morning. You can check it out. Like him, I'm a big supporter of public transit. Clap.
Thank you. Now, they don't have a video for me, so on the one hand, I have nothing to follow, but on the other hand, I can say whatever I want. So basically, I was born in North York, grew up in Ajax, moved to Hamilton when I was 18, and I've been here ever since, so I've been in Hamilton longer than I've been anywhere else. I guess that makes me a Hamiltonian. 10 years ago, after getting frustrated with the conversation that we didn't see happening, a group of people, including me, started Raise the Hammer. We wanted to have a public discussion about urban revitalization and kind of civic affairs, and we didn't have any money, so we started a website. And in retrospect, that turns out to have been a pretty good idea, because 10 years later, we're still doing it. It still doesn't cost any money, and we've been able to do a lot of really neat things and meet some great people and maybe help expand the conversation a little bit. That's all I got.
Thank you very much. Again, technical difficulties. We do have a video for Ryan McGreal, and you can check it out on our website, hamiltonmediaeagle.net. Finally, our moderator, you know him, you love him, you read his stuff that he looks at every single day. He's the managing editor of the Hamilton Spectator, Jim Poland.
Thank you. Thanks everybody for coming out, and a special thanks to Dan Nolan, reporter of Spec. This is a quick video. I'm going to go off script here because I do like to type. You're going to see parts of a video here which are important to me. It was at a time when we were struggling how to do multimedia in our newsrooms. We had a group of, we were there at just regular Friday at Spec. We had a group of grade 9 students come in to take your kid to work day. I sat down, talked to them about journalism. I asked them, what do you like to do? We like to make videos. They said, you're kidding. We like to make videos here too, so we don't know how to do it. They grabbed an iPhone, and in probably about 20 minutes, maybe it was about 3 minutes, they produced a video about my day at the Spec. We still show up on our website, and it was a bit of a lesson for us about how grade 9 kids who were unencumbered, who know media, who needed some help with storytelling, could turn around something quite quickly. It was a lesson for all of us, and it's partly one of the reasons why I'm here today. I know my script is ended. I'm quite excited today. I want to turn over most of the conversation to our panelists, because I'm curious and interested in what they have to say. I do want to give a couple quick shout outs to Hamilton Media Guild. I think it's fantastic what you're doing. Keep it up. Newsrooms typically are a full contact sport. Get used to it. But this is the energy that you have here is part of the art of the possible. I'd also like to give a shout out to Roger Gillespie, who's here. Roger was a long-time managing editor at The Spectator. He and I worked closely together for probably 20 years. Roger is also at CBC Digital and also at the internet startup, digital startup that ran at the Spec for a while. There's also 3 generations of polling in the room, which probably is, maybe you've had enough of me. But I want to give a shout out. My daughter's here. My son is here. He's a communications major who has his own internet startup. And my dad is here. My dad came from Barrie to be here because he's deeply interested in media. He spent more than 30 years in media running the Canadian Press news service, and is the author of 10 books. Deeply engaged, is on social media, and I think it's part of the testament to what HMG brought together here. So enough about me. Our panelists here, we've all had intros. There is a script. Sherry and her team have done a wonderful job of pulling a nice format. Typical me, I'm not going to stick to it. What I'd really like to, what I'm encouraging the panelists to do, this is not a plebiscite on media. It's really an evening of engagement. I'm deeply interested in hearing about new models, old models, how we merge, and more importantly, how we tell stories in our neighborhoods and beyond. I would like to start with just an opening question. Maybe we can start with, let's start with Ryan, and we'll come down this way. Tell us a little bit about your model, why you believe it works, and a little bit about the secret sauce that you believe fuels your engagement. And we'll do it, Brian, and then you come on down and feel free to jump in.
Thank you. I think the secret of Raise the Hammer of our success in business is that we just decided not to play. Right from the start, we decided we would be strictly non-commercial, not-for-profit. We don't bring in any revenue of any kind. We don't pay anybody anything of any kind. It costs $10 a month to host the website, and it's $10 a year to register the domain. Those are our only expenses. And so the way we're able to operate is that because nobody is making any money off of the enterprise, and because we have kind of a civic engagement focus, people perceive, in my opinion rightly, that Raise the Hammer is more of a public discourse rather than an enterprise for business. And so people are willing to write and contribute and not expect to get paid for it. And I think the reason is that my background is I'm a software developer, and almost all the software that I use is free and open source software. And it's programs that have been written by people and given away for free and shared freely. And that kind of sharing philosophy, or that sharing culture, people are willing to contribute because on the one hand they want to be seen and recognized, and they want to give back. And I think that same kind of philosophy is what drives Raise the Hammer. And it means that over the past 10 years we've been able to get a steady supply of contributions from some people write every week, every couple of weeks, some people write once a month, some people have only written one thing. But it ends up being something that a lot of people participate in, and it feels like participation. It doesn't sort of feel like people are being taken advantage of.
That's great. Oh, yes, Tina.
Well, with Luminescence, obviously we're a year this March, so we're still trying to figure out exactly the perfect model, because that's the beauty of being an online platform, because we're quite fluid to really see what works. And because our mandate was really to inspire and showcase and celebrate professional women, what is working for us is the fact that we can still reach out to a global audience while still maintaining a local focus. So, because when you talk about inspiration or professional women or anything that pertains to gender demographics, it really comes down to speaking to a global audience. So I think the reason we realized early on that we should be an online platform was because we wanted to have a broader conversation, have a wide audience that we can reach globally, while at the same time really bringing attention to our locality, as well as really building a connectivity or some sort of a hub where all women or guys who get it, as we've also done quite well with the magazine, can really connect. So I think that's why our model is working, because the things we're talking about are relatable across the globe and across communities, but at the same time, our community is reflected on a larger scale. So I think it's a model that's working, and it's a model that we will continue with. But again, another thing we've realized is that we have to work across different mediums. So we are having the magazine as one platform, but now again we launched the chat with the Luminescence because we realized that people want to have conversations with us. We have fantastic contributors and writers, and people want to hear what they have to say. People want to get their opinions, as well as try to also showcase the people we've featured on a broader scale, where they can also share their experiences or their success journeys as well. So this platform will also broaden that audience that we've also gotten, but also build that connectivity that's really important on a multimedia platform.
Oh yeah, no, I'll step on the court when you do yours, don't worry. In the neighborhood is actually it's a three-man team. The other two bozos aren't with me, Matt and Dan Jelly. Our model is actually going to find the stories, where we go to a certain ward in the city, we sit down with a shop owner or someone from that neighborhood, and we talk to them. You know, what affects your neighborhood? What is going on here? What do you have to say about politics? What do you have to say about the hole in the road? What do you have to say about Hamilton? And because of that, there's great interest in the website. We don't try to be too picky or choosy on who we interview, but we try to get the story out of them. And the other part of it is, that makes it easy for us is that all of us have a little bit of ego in us, or we wouldn't do any of this, whether we were interviewing them or someone wanting to be interviewed. And we have a lot of success with people who want to have a voice but can't get on traditional media. They can't get on CHML and do a talk show, and they can't actually get on CH or any of these things because it's just, they just don't know how to do it. So we do this little niche where we go out and it's field reporting is what it is. And we just go right to the root of storytelling, and that's what the website is. And we don't make any money on it. We don't even plan to make any money on it. As I told these two gentlemen earlier, that my vision of it is just to do this for so many years and just leave it as a legacy on the internet, where at some point someone will go, well, that was actually going on, I didn't know that, I wonder what this person's doing now. So we'll see how far we take this, but truly deep down, if there was a way I could make it sound better and sell it to the CBC, I would. Probably just for one of those Olympic jackets, because I heard they bought a lot of them. Martinez?
The work that I'm involved in right now it's different than a lot of the folks who've spoken so far, in the sense that we are 100% for profit. That said, we don't always make one, and that's the interesting thing. That's the interesting thing about media is we're also not just Urbanicity magazine. MGI Media is the company that I own, and MGI then operates the Boldboard Network, which are indoor billboards. If you use the Washington, a lot of pubs in the cities, you're going to see advertisements that we've placed there. We run bus tours. We consider that a form of communication as well. You have an audience on a bus that curated a message and they're shown things, and obviously there's a slant on exactly what they're told. So we do a bunch of different ventures, even the Hamilton 24-Hour Film Festival. That's also a product, if you will, of MGI Media. Now, the interesting thing is, because this is all that I do, it needs to, in some way, make money. It doesn't always, and that's the struggle with media. So I'd love to say that there's some special sauce, which is just working, but the truth is it's extremely difficult. And Urbanicity, I know, has gone through some very rocky terrain over the last year, and you're going to see some major changes coming out over the course of the next few months. There's going to be a big relaunch in May, actually. So I don't know. Some things we're doing are working. Some things we're doing are not working. And I think that's what I'm excited for this conversation tonight to be a part of, is to kind of hear where everyone else's minds are at, and where what we do on multiple platforms will ultimately fit into that.
Thank you. I turn it over to Matthew. When we get through some of the questions, I'd like to turn it over to the audience. We'll probably get about halfway, three-quarters of the evening. So if you have questions, feel free to jump in. Really, this is an evening for the panelists. I'll turn it over to Matthew. You probably have a different view because you don't have a sole product.
Yeah.
So,
thanks. So for those who don't know, Gig at Home, which is where I work, is a company based in San Francisco. It's, I guess, global, if you want to put it that way. It's not focused on a local market. We're trying to reach anyone who can use the internet. We have three ways of making money. One is advertising, so pretty traditional media form of revenue, advertising on the website, which doesn't actually make a huge amount of money. So we have two other revenue sources. One is conferences. So we do a series of, I think it's 4 or 5 conferences a year, based around a number of topics. And then we sell proprietary research to companies about specific industry sectors. So I don't write those. We have analysts who focus on specific industry sectors, and then we sell reports based on those. So conferences and proprietary research basically pay the bills. The advertising supported editorial, which is stuff I do, is basically a loss leader to try and convince people to come to our conferences or buy a research report. So that's our business model in a nutshell. We're venture funded, so we raised venture financing, which means we're not profitable, but we are desperately trying to become profitable. And so in that sense, I guess we're very similar to Martinez's outfit. It'd be a lot easier if we could just say we were not-for-profit, because that would then we wouldn't even have to try and make a profit. But we do try.
Matthew, I'm going to go back down the line, and folks, feel free to jump in. What are your observations as you you work in media? You've come out of you've been an early adopter. What do you see, or what do you recognize in the four panelists here? So we've four very different, and I want to use the word different carefully, but we've four approaches that vary from one another. And I just want you to talk about that and what you see in digital media and where we might be going.
Sure, and I guess I was thinking that, in fact, while everyone was talking. I don't know if Joey Coleman's here, but I hope, he said he was going to, there he is there. So, big hand for Joey. If we had another chair, you should probably be on this panel too.
Yes, it should.
So hopefully, so I was thinking about Joey, and I was thinking about some of these different approaches, and the thing that strikes me the most is, you know, not just that no one has sort of figured it out, which I think is obvious, but that what matters, I think, specifically when it comes to, I guess you would call it local or hyper-local, whatever you want to call it, it's about personal passion. At least I feel that from this panel. And certainly if you're doing something that doesn't make money, you know, passion has to be the reason why you do it, because you're certainly not doing it for money. And I think that's actually, you know, when I talked to Joey about his efforts, particularly around crowdfunding, that passion is what you're selling in a way. You know, it's not the content or the words or even the pictures. And I don't think, in that sense, I think everybody here, whether they're nonprofit or not, they're selling something. They're selling their interest in something or their passion about something. And that's, to me, that's what people connect with. Whether you're a columnist with a big paper or someone on TV, or that passion or that interest is what people are connecting with. And that's, I think, what convinces people to support you. So, at least hopefully it does.
Jumping on that, Ryan, is where you're at, is that the epitome of success? Is there a time where you would take money or consider advertising, or is that just not in the cards?
It's a question that we kind of go back and revisit from time to time. But we're at a point now where Raise the Hammer is sustainable in the sense that it doesn't cost more money than we can afford, and it doesn't take more work than we can put into it. So for now, for the time being, I don't see any upside to taking money. As soon as we decide we want to start taking money or start trying to generate revenue, it complicates all of the other personal relationships that make Raise the Hammer possible. And so we would immediately fall into the trap of suddenly now it becomes a full-time job trying to make enough money to keep the lights on, whereas right now, you know, it's, I jokingly call it my increasingly inaccurate thinking hobby, but it's something that it doesn't suck up so much time and energy that I'm not able to do other things to make money. So for now, the balance has been, I would rather just keep money. Essentially, we're avoiding that very hard problem of how to make money in local media by just avoiding the problem altogether.
But I thought it was interesting that you said that actually not being revenue driven or profit driven to some extent might make people more comfortable with the content because they don't feel like you're selling specific things or you're only running things because it's related to your revenue model, which I think is an interesting point.
Sure. I mean, right now we are disinterested in the sense that, you know, we don't have to worry about offending a sponsor. We just don't have to worry about any of those things. You know, the circumspection that comes into our writing comes from wanting to make sure that we don't say something that's irresponsible or wrong that we can get called out on, but we're not afraid of damaging a fiduciary relationship.
Marie, this is a good time for you to jump in. So where is that line for you? Because you have an advocate role.
Yes, and as I was listening to all Matthew and Ryan and Martinez, there's definitely a thread. Because with the luminescence, that's exactly where we are. What we've realized is that when you're speaking from a local perspective, trying to connect with your community, automatically you have to deal with that aspect of this. The first thing is it's not about the money. It's a passion-driven initiative. It's driven by courage and passion, because when I sit here, all of us here, I can sense that we all are very courageous to really do this, first of all, and also very passionate about it, which makes us very relentless in our pursuit to continue doing it. But again, going back to Matthias and Matthew yourself, what we've realized is as much as we want to maintain that and not be the focus of our work, we also have to connect and raise revenue from it. So the events, definitely, because again, we want to connect with our audience, and that's another way where we can connect with our audience and provide something of value to them. Because we're talking about professional women, we're talking about professional advancement, and really building alliances and partnerships with guys who get it. So that cannot happen just being behind the scenes. We have to have events to generate revenue, and we also have to have events to connect with our audience. And then finally, the other thing that you spoke about is the different platforms. So there is the conferences that you do, the tours. How can you balance bringing in revenue and also your time, like you said, Ryan, because I also have a full-time job. So doing that in addition to this becomes, again, how do you market it properly and are doing it effectively so you can really generate sustainable revenue as well as maintain your other obligations. So I think it's a very interesting avenue that we have to really look into and see how we can go across it and try to do it effectively.
I did want to point out, just when Ryan was talking about his site, it is pretty amazing when you think about it that you can produce something for almost nothing. You know, dozens of dollars maybe to host your site. Then it's just people who feel like writing for you, and you can theoretically reach an incredibly large audience. That's really never been possible before. I mean, you had to spend so much money on printing or publishing or radio or TV. You had to have all this equipment. And I mean, still you can do those things, you know, as you grow. But it really is amazing what you can do for virtually nothing.
So with each of you, who is your competition?
I think that's the beauty of this, because I think we complement each other to a large extent, because, again, because you're on the web, you really are speaking to a global audience. And early on, we realized, even with our followers or people on Twitter or Facebook, that it's so wide where we're not just in Hamilton. When we look at our stats, we've had over 50,000 views and just from all over. So I think we're not in competition. If anything, we are complementing each other and just giving that wealth of information out to the public to really just have various avenues of information. So I think that's the beauty of it.
Purely an audience competition? Competition for audience and readers' attention?
Most likely.
The competition really stems from looking for the dollar. That's where the competition is. With the internet, if you're doing independent journalism or blogging, or you have a blog site, you're better to share the other person's information and connect with them. There's no, like, in radio, you never went on the air and said, big shout out to someone over at Why I Went Away, whatever. You never mentioned you were the only thing on the planet, and that's it. But on the internet, if you're doing a blog or you're doing independent journalism, everyone is sharing this information. Twitter is one scary social platform. It is like, you can ruin someone's day. Now, you cannot pay me enough to be a PR person at this point. I mean, you could. I mean, I take the money. It'd have to be a lot, and I'm not asking you. I'm maybe begging, but someone tweets something, takes a quick pic of you or of your client, and you're in spin control constantly. But now you have 50,000 followers of that person, and they're spinning it out of control, and everyone's spinning it out of control. It's so instantaneous that I sat here while introducing it, I said, he smells like David Beckham. And I'm just waiting for like the jerks in Hamilton to go, yeah, don't you smell like David Beckham? But it's true, and everyone's a journalist now, and everyone's in the media right now, and that's what scares me. And I've been saying this the last couple of weeks, thinking about it, is what are the guidelines to doing what I do, or anyone who has a Twitter account? Because you can't. Well, I'm going to sue you because you said this about my store. Well, I had a bad time at your store. Yeah, but you have 25,000 followers. Yeah, I don't know if they all read it, to be honest. So, where does that go? Like, how do you defend against something like that? And for big papers, the Spec, here's a traditional medium that, as a kid, I used to read the Spec all the time. As I get older, this new technology comes along. How do they make money now? You throw a paywall up, I'm just going to go over to CBC Hamilton, or I'm going to go over here. So, there's a lot of struggles right now.
But you'd start on CBC Hamilton.
Sorry?
You'd start on CBC Hamilton. You have to come back to spec.com for information.
Oh, no, because you have a paywall. I have so many ways. Hey, no, you can clap. You get a paycheck. That's cool. But there's just so much out there. And what bothers me is who is making sure that I'm not saying something wrong about you? Who's keeping me in check? Who's the gatekeeper? And I think it was a year and a half or 2 years ago, I was Bob Bertina would do interviews with local journalists. You have to have a boss. I got to know who I'm talking to afterwards. Well, shut up. You're a politician. You were voted in. And these are the people that I'm interviewing. I'm commenting about something. Take my interview. Just because someone's not giving me a paycheck doesn't mean I don't have the right to ask you a question.
I think he lumped everybody. I think he called me dissenters.
Well, he also said that the internet's a very dark place. And so since he said that, I've been tweeting happy thoughts. Michael Candy thinks I'm on drugs now. He said, did somebody give you happy pills? I'm like, I'm in a dark place. But back to the original lead, it's like, who's our competition? Well, no one's really our competition, only if you're chasing the dollar. So I'm in a position where I'm not chasing the dollar. Well, Martine.
Yeah, I'm chasing the dollar a little bit. Our competition, we're a unique rag where we actually purchase distribution from the Spectator, from Metroland. We buy about 5,000 doorsteps from them every month. And we were allowed to do that because we met with Paul Burton and we met with Dana Robbins at the time, who was the publisher, and they essentially deemed us non-competitive. That we just weren't competition to them. And we didn't see the Spec as competition to us either, because frankly, the people who are going to spend $4,000, $5,000 on a full page ad in the Spectator are not going to spend money in Urbanicity and vice versa. So it's a different print market. That said, there is some overlap with The View. And so you're going to see some things happen after me. But Sean Rosen just walked in and he's ready on the latest snack. All right, so there are some aspects of competition there, I would say, between Urbanicity and The View, but still not. And again, when it comes down to competition for readership, I can definitely see that a little bit. And that's one of the reasons that we went to print. And we actually started Urbanicity because we were quite frustrated. No offense to Jim at all, but with the Spectator's coverage of the 2010 municipal election. There were 20 candidates running in Ward 2, and there were 2 articles printed about the Ward 2 race, and one of them was about Matt Jelly shaving his beard. Now, I'm not saying this with frustration because I ran against Matt Jelly and he beat me fair and square, but the guy shaved his beard. That warrants an article, half page with a picture, and I don't know, I'm sure there's a decision making behind that. But we were so frustrated, and we said, look, there are people reading print, or the Spec would have evaporated. So there are people reading print. 110,000 papers a day. Somebody's reading that. And then we put out Urbanicity, and it was a print product. So we're competitive in the sense that we need to pay a huge amount of overhead every month. It costs thousands of dollars to print, to distribute, to lay out Urbanicity. That is not cheap.
Well, nobody does printing.
That's right. But what we found was a very interesting audience. After almost every issue comes out, I get a phone call from this lovely woman. She's 86 in the Augusta Seniors Tower, and she wants to talk about the last issue. Now, she's not our only reader, obviously, but it's interesting because she would not have found us if we were online. She wouldn't have found us on Twitter. And so we are now building a digital site as well, because you simply have to, I think. But there was just a big open space we found in the market for long-form conversations about hyper-local topics in print format. So at the time, the View was publishing Savage Love and stuff like that. And we saw, hey, you know, they're not talking about local politics in a deep way. We can go there. The Spectator didn't seem to be at the time. We could go there. And we didn't bother with the digital side. And now we're playing catch up on the digital side.
Yeah, I just wanted to, the only point I wanted to make, apart from competitive, you know, whether you're competing with another website, whether you're competing with another paper, I think we're all, media of all forms is competing just for attention. And because there is the web, because there are mobile devices, because there's Twitter, because there's Angry Birds and, you know, Candy Crush and Flappy Bird or whatever, I never even played that thing, but apparently every fifth person is now playing it. So that's what you're competing with. You know, you're competing with the 5 minutes that someone could spend doing something else on their mobile. And I think that's, you know, when I was at the Globe, our publisher used to talk about how we were doing against the Star and how we were doing against the Post, and sometimes maybe how we were doing against the CBC. But, you know, I kept trying to argue that's just a fragment of our competition. The entire internet is our competition. And in fact, not just the internet, but everything you can do on your computer or a mobile device.
Yeah, I was just going to add that I think that question spoke definitely to what we're talking about here tonight, because it's talking about doing it differently. And I think the competition becomes not such an issue when you identify a niche. You identify a niche and provide the authentic content that they expect from you. So just like you were saying, Mercedes, if you realize that the spec wasn't covering something, or that you can cover it but slightly different. So it's really identifying how you can continue to provide authentic content to your readers. So what we've done again skillfully is just to identify what appeals to our readers, what they expect from us, and being consistent in delivering that content. I think that really minimizes your competition. And again, just when you find out what it is that's missing and try to fill that gap, and I think that's what drives independent journalism as well, because we've been in business for about a year and we're yet to find any platform that's doing what we're doing and how we're doing it. So I think what sets you apart and really minimizes your competition is when you identify a niche and really try to do it well. And I think with the spec, just like you rightly said, it's because when you think about traditional media platforms, they're very ingrained in the community. So even if I check my phone or my laptop, I still want to see the paper. So that's where the balance comes in, where there are things you're going to see in your paper that you will not see online. So there's always that traditionalist aspect attached to it. So it really doesn't become so much as a competition, but really just an extension of telling the community stories in a different format.
And I would say, just to follow up on that the single best thing you can have from a competitive point of view is a connection to your readers, to your community, to whoever you're serving, your market, whatever you want to call it. And I'm sure Joey would probably agree, probably knows individual listeners or readers, you know, by names, probably been over to their houses for birthday parties for all I know. But that connection, that sort of personal connection to readers or the people formerly known as the audience is what makes you different. Any of the people up here I'm sure would agree that you serving, not just pushing things to them, but listening to them, talking to them, you know, behaving like a normal human being to them, something that traditional media hasn't always been that good at. That's your competitive advantage.
How's the audience? Are we okay for time, everyone? Yeah, where's Sherry? Sherry, We're about 10% through, 10% through the agenda that Sherry's mapped out, so I think get here by about 11:45. Jamie, you used an interesting word earlier, journalist. You said everyone's a journalist, which I disagree with. I think there's lots of people, myself, I believe there's lots of people who have access to ability to output information that doesn't necessarily make them journalists, but I'm curious about your thoughts here. Do you see yourself as journalist? Do you see yourself as, is there another term?
I didn't take journalism. I actually took radio at Mohawk College. My mentor for how to do radio is sitting over there. His name's Daryl Hartwig. And he's the one, actually, that instills a lot of, to be vigilant, to tell the story correctly, to be honest, and where's the catch in the story? What makes the story interesting? That's where I learned all of my journalism background. And I used to work with the students at the radio station. For me, that's where my passion comes from, was actually the telling of the story. I was never really, I mean, I love music and I've always promoted it, but when I was on the air, I always enjoyed listening more than actually speaking. So that's where, when I say everyone's a journalist, that's the scary part, because you disagree because you're right, because they haven't been trained, they don't know how to tell the story, what constitutes slander, or anything. You could write something that could really screw up everyone's day and cost your employer a lot of money. And even on an independent level, it happens all the time. I'm not putting Martinez on the spot, but it is a great segue. He said there's some changes coming to urbanicity. Maybe the View won't like it, but there was a bit of a controversy that happened with urbanicity, where there was people submitting stories, and it seemed as if there was no one checking the stories. It was just so random. And one of them was on atheism, and someone said evolution. And there was a lot of people that were upset about it. And I'm like, well, it's just really just an opinion piece. And some friends of mine were like, well, that guy's wrong, and he should never have done it. And it's just an opinion. So, and then you later printed, well, that should never have happened. They shouldn't have put that in. And it was a retraction. And a retraction, you can't say ish. Ish is kind of like, well, I kind of pooped my pants. No, you shouldn't have been. Yeah. So, but that affects urbanicity as well, because he's building up a brand, and there's local advertisers, and then all of a sudden people go, well, I'm going to call so-and-so, who I know them, and then you're going to get that letter. And that's the same thing with Twitter. I know there's some great instructors up at the college and every university. When journalism students and radio students are taking to promoting on Twitter, they have to realize if they have that tag beside their name of their employer, that you could lose your job. You know, if you're not careful. Do you want to respond to that?
Yeah, so I got to respond to that. So I appreciate that it was an opinion piece, and basically what happened was there was an article we published. It's exactly a year ago. It was February 2013. This last year. February 2013 issue came out. It was called The Dangers of Evolution. It was an article that our editor at the time had put in because he found it controversial. They said it was someone who was a hyper-creationist, essentially saying that evolution is completely stupid, and anyone who believes in evolution is not only stupid, but has similarities to some pretty notorious people in history. And just wrote it right off. I later wrote that should never have seen the light of day, not because I think that he wasn't valid to express his opinion, because that's the whole point of urbanicity. To answer the question about journalism, there is no one at urbanicity who's a journalist. So if you're looking for journalism, do not read urbanicity. We print opinions, we print controversy, we talk about the city and all of its raw guts and glory, and that's what urbanicity is, that's what it will always be. What we retracted about that piece was it was horribly, horribly written, and it lumped people in unfairly, it painted with a broad brush, it was just a really bad piece. It should never have been printed, ever. It was awful. The ideas were extreme. I did not hit, no. The ideas were extreme. The ideas are really quite loud and quite, all or nothing. But there has to be space for that in conversation. And that's one other thing that Urbanicity tries to do is sometimes go to those really awkward spaces. And that's really hard to do when you do rely on advertisers. Cool thing was, we did get people calling our advertisers, talking about advertisers, saying you should never advertise with them ever again. But not a single advertiser dropped out. And in fact, they said that's why we advertise with Urbanicity, is because you will have the difficult conversations. We did hear from some of them, though, that was a pretty awful piece, and it was a pretty awful piece. So for that, I sincerely apologize. And I can give you a million reasons that piece was published, but there's no point in hashing and justifying the past. So that was really it. That was really kind of the story about now.
Yeah, I think it's easy to get sort of bogged down in who's a journalist and who's not. So everybody has their own definition of who's a journalist and who's not. It used to be a lot easier to define because we only considered people journalists if they'd been to journalism school or if they worked for a major media entity. So now people can do journalism on their own. They don't necessarily have to have a degree. That doesn't mean that everyone who runs a blog or everyone who has a website is a journalist. But it certainly means that they're capable of being journalists. And it certainly means that all of the tools and all of the skills and all of the sort of capabilities that we associate with journalism are now available to anyone. I think, would you agree? Yeah.
Just on what's behind my question, I don't consider, because somebody has a J degree, doesn't, journalism is far broader than that. Some of the, many of the best editors I've worked with are not traditional journalism, don't hold a master's or a university degree in journalism. Steve Houston, Spectator, right now probably one of the best leading investigative journalists in the country, I expect. His degree's in human biology. He's not a classically trained journalist at all. I know in the last 10 years, I'm interviewing people who can tell stories, who have instincts for a news story, who are competitive, who are compassionate, who are empathetic, who now can use digital tools. So really, that's what I'm bringing to journalism. I thought it was an interesting point from Jamie's, just using that word. I thought it was a good launching point. Ryan, do you want to pick up there? Because you're doing a lot of journalism.
It's funny. It's some people will sometimes say to me, "So, do you consider yourself a journalist?" And it's not a question that I really have a hard answer to one way or the other. It's also not a question that keeps me up at night. I find that traditionally trained journalists are a lot more focused on that question. So based on that, I might not be a journalist. But what I would suggest maybe as a way of breaking out of the impasse is that if some of what we do looks a lot like journalism, I would say that we're amateur journalists. I'm going to pull a Clay Shirky here if nobody minds and suggest that what the internet has done is it has amateurized the process of journalism to a huge extent. And I think what I'm starting to observe with what we're doing with Raise the Hammer, what I'm starting to see a bit more widely, is that the two sides are kind of starting to come together. The traditional media are becoming more savvy into new media, they're becoming more responsive and more agile, and sort of the new upstart, independent, alternative, online media are becoming more professional. Certainly over the years, we've learned a lot about defamation law. We've learned a lot about, not by being sued, but...
do each of you use or have access to media counsel?
No, I don't think so. If I do, I've never used it.
Have you been sued? Or you have lawyers?
We haven't been sued, but we were threatened by the mayor. I investigated the thing. I interviewed the writer who had written the piece. I interviewed the mayor's chief of staff, and went back, and it turned out that their version of events simply did not square with reality. It was an utterly spurious charge, and I wrote a long piece explaining how we investigated and came to the conclusion that this was not a serious accusation.
So you haven't had a conservative libel notice?
No. And that's the one. That's one. It's actually just knowing Canadian defamation law, because it's not like American law. There's, I mean, you can be sued for defamation if what you say is true, if you use it in a particularly malicious way. Like it's not really cut and dry. So that has made us increasingly circumspect as we've gone on. We've become better and better at not saying things that could potentially expose us to that kind of legal liability.
Well, the exposure is interesting, given the digital brand, your digital audience. The person doesn't necessarily have to be in Hamilton. You know, you can be sued from Italy or where laws are a lot different. Jay, what about yourself? Have you had need for media counsel?
I haven't, and I haven't been sued yet. I hope I don't get sued, but I think I always define myself as an accidental journalist or an accidental publisher, an accidental entrepreneur, because if you asked me even a year and a half ago, I wouldn't. I always had the passion to tell stories. I always knew I wanted to be able to share stories like what we're doing with Luminescence. But did I think it was going to happen this fast and happen this way? No. So what I have done to try to protect myself is really rely on the team that we have Lisa, for example, who is a communications expert to a large extent. And we also have fantastic writers. I have Kayla Perrin, who's been writing for years. So we've tried to rely on counsel also and advice from experts such as even Roger Gillespie to really guide us, because I know this is not my forte, it is not my expertise, but I'm trying to provide content that's authentic and as well as do something that's quite professional. So I have to try to cover those bases. So what I've done is really just rely on experts and journalists and people that come from a communications background. So I look at myself really as the passionate force behind Luminescence, because I see the value in it and I think it's something that should be done and done well, but then I defer back to the experts to help me so I don't get sued.
I really like what Ryan said, where he doesn't really think about it a lot, whether he's a journalist or not. The only people who seem obsessed with who's a journalist and who's not are professional journalists who I think see everyone as competition, and probably should, because there are a lot more accidental journalists out there. Joey, do you consider yourself a journalist?
I don't give a care for the title. Just give me access and let me write.
So Andy Carbon, did anybody follow Andy Carbon during the Arab Spring? NPR, just an incredible use of of Twitter as a real-time newsroom. I had a long discussion with a guy who argued that Andy was not a journalist, which I found bizarre, because that was one of the best examples of real-time social journalism I've ever seen. And he said, well, he's not a journalist. He didn't have any journalism training. In fact, he hasn't been trained as a journalist. And I said, well, what difference does that make? I mean, like you, I know lots of people, great journalists, who never got any training until they got on the job. So we had this discussion about the newspaper, and I went through different things in the newspaper. I said, what about the columnist? That's not journalism. What about the gardening section or the lifestyle? That's not journalism. And by the time we were done, there was only about probably 10-15% of the newspaper that this guy actually saw as journalism. So that's a pretty narrow definition for me. I think journalism is a lot broader than that, or should be.
We are, 8:10. Sherry, how are we making up for time? Sure. Do we have many questions? I know Joey has. Joey probably has many.
Actually, I wanted to add a couple things, because I was mentioned a few times and asked my thoughts by Matthew. So, firstly, on the knowing your audience. So my career, if you would, started accidentally in that I was a first-year university student, going back to the internet after 3 years in the Army where I wasn't allowed to have.
Joey has a question coming.
No, well, I'm getting to the point of engagement, but if I'm interrupting, then I will sit down.
No, go ahead.
Okay, so what I was going to say is that I started accidentally. I never intended to be a journalist. Right. I was blogging on higher ed, something I was involved in, and I built a network of contacts across the country. And I could tell you who was visiting my blog based upon my analytics. So when I went to McLean's, They recruited me in, and 2 weeks in, I sat down with my managing editor and said, I got a problem here. One, I don't have access to analytics, so I can't tell where people are coming. I don't know who my audience is. Two, I don't have comments. And at the time, it was a policy at Maclean's, Rogers Media, you don't have comments. We had 50 people who could comment, and that was it, and they were hand-selected. And I got both, because again, it comes down to when something's happening, I do it in Hamilton all the time, I call people and say, hey, you're in this area, there's a fire over there, what are you seeing? So it's actually, it's a two-way conversation. It's so important to know your audience, and that's probably the great challenge of mass media, is that there's such a mass audience out there. Google knows more about people who are searching results in Hamilton than the Spectator does about its subscribers. And that's a challenge that, it's changing the model. In terms of definition of journalist, your paper itself, Jim, my title changes every different article. Activist, parking attendant, blogger,
Right.
sometimes journalist. And
It's all fair. Depends on the role.
yeah, but what I'm saying is that we should not, and that's where a great piece, and I think you all should read it. It's not about the person, it's about the act. And I think that, if I may, Jim, we have a responsibility as professional journalists, because I'm professionally trained, I've worked for Maclean's Globe and Mail. We have a responsibility to actually do workshops and train people on journalism so that the act of journalism improves. That's our role as journalists. It's much like amateur astronomy. Astronomers don't complain about the guy in his backyard with a telescope who discovers a new astronomical body. They say, here's an award, thank you so much, let me grab your research and use my more powerful tools to pinpoint this even more. And then they go back and we stay in partnership, whereas we as journalists have traditionally said, thanks for the news tip, let me slap my byline on it and drop your name from the story.
Well, to be fair, Joey, fair enough, I appreciate the point. So it's not a plebiscite in traditional media, but on the point of journalists, the point I will make, seeing a lot of people who love to tell stories, who love to write, who have access to tools. I appreciate them, God love them, they're engaging. I see a lot of people back off right away from being a journalist when they get hit with a libel suit and they've got to start being a lawyer. And they say, I didn't really mean it to say it that way. When you don't have an infrastructure around you, people start to back off with the same with other people or institutions in a hurry.
Agreed, and that's why we need to build those infrastructures for the act of journalism, not just for people who collect a paycheck doing it.
I'm with you.
Jim, one thing, I've kind of come to this understanding about Joey over the last couple of years. He's not so much a journalist per se, as he is a one-man journalism platform. It's good. Like Joey, he recruits and engages and amplifies thousands of Hamiltonians who aren't trained journalists, and he draws their work into this unending stream of information that he provides. And I think he's doing the thing that he just said. He's actually taking people who aren't journalists and taking what they do and making it part of the journalism that he produces. And that's, I would say, probably the most innovative thing of anyone in this room right now.
Yeah, I agree.
Is there are people biased when they do stories and who they cover in journalism and how they write it?
People in general?
In general. Like being biased. Like when you're covering something and then you put a slant on the story, but it's not really, I mean, it's kind of fact, but you kind of put a skew on it.
So there's a little bit of loaded language now, which is probably, we'll do this when HMG has their second panel. So
right.
Everyone has subjectivity. I think that's fair.
Yeah. Okay. I don't know. To me, it's kind of like that's, because I interview people and I cover certain material and I try to cover as many people as I can. But I mean, Joey's here and Joey will cover. He crowdfunds. He got a camera. He's streaming. He's living the dream. But shouldn't Joey be following the same rules as you? Or anyone else, where you just can't pick and choose what you want to cover.
Who makes the rules, though?
Yeah, who's making the rules for what you get to cover and how you cover something?
Nobody.
Shouldn't it be some rules?
Well,
because advertisers, they do the rules. They do the rules, don't they? I mean, you got some calls, and other people have got the calls and stuff.
So who makes the rules?
Who makes the rules? So doesn't that boil down to integrity, that sort of thing, like right from the get-go? And if you have integrity and you're delivering something, then you get the followers, and then you get the sponsorships, that sort of thing. So that's the kind of thing that I struggle with, is you really want to talk. What do you want to say?
Well, as an actress, and I have my own blog, I'm known as Steel City Rising Against Poverty. So, since the early 90s, whether it's mainstream media, always, the poor and those who are struggling, they have been bashed and bashed and bashed. And there's not really a whole lot of truth out there. And that was very clear when the Connaught issue came forward, which was a hot topic on Raise the Hammer. And I was just flabbergasted at the responses from people. So, are you journalists, professionals checking? Are you actually telling the stories properly from those who have those life experiences? Are there voices being diminished? Because I know myself that I have been labeled as not a very nice person because I ask those really hard questions that people do not want to address. And I represent Hamilton Independent Media Awards, and it's in honor of Maggie Hughes, who asked some of those very hard questions, and she always talked about being put down by professionals. Thank you.
I think you raise a really good point, that people, whether they think of themselves as journalists or not, there's more opportunity now than ever to make your voice heard, to sort of bang on the door of traditional media or whatever, and get your point of view across. And it might not always work, but there's certainly way more sort of potential for that than there used to be, which is a good thing, I think.
And I think just to add to that, that's where integrity comes in, because ultimately you want to tell the stories, and you want to tell the stories correctly, or at least as factual as possible. And one of the things that we've tried to do, I always say that going into a story, I don't go in with an angle. I go in to try to let the story define itself. So the same thing if you're covering a community, you really want to cover the community in all its facets and really portray it as accurately as possible, because I think that's the danger with a lot of times when you're trying to angle stories or not really look at a wholesome picture of your community and try to tell the stories within the various communities that we have. So I think it's so important to really maintain that integrity and say, first and foremost, I am here to tell the story as it is and as it's supposed to be told, not as it's supposed to be defined by whether it's mainstream media or we have so many pundits and everybody. Because you find, and that's the beauty of social media, but also the danger of it. Because as you rightly said earlier, Ghana, where Twitter, one tweet can change a story completely and destroy somebody's day and destroy perceptions of communities, and even Hamilton as a community. I think I'm one person who's so in love with Hamilton, but I still hear people say, oh my God, Hamilton, you live there, what's so great about it? Because again, our stories were told differently by others, and for years we've been trying to redefine our story and rebrand, not even rebrand, because Hamilton has always been an amazing city. But I think, again, because the story of Hamilton might have been told in the past by journalists or others who did not portray it as accurately as the Hamiltonians themselves, we're still struggling with that. So I think it's so important to just be true and authentic and factual and as objective as possible when you're telling a story.
Great, thank you. I'd like to jump some questions. Probably best if I can run show. Why don't you come on? You gotta walk up. You have to walk up. You have a question for you.
Okay. I guess I was noticing that no one was really mentioning how Hamilton plays into each of your journeys and how you were able to do the things that you're doing in this city. Because it's not just the internet that allows you to be accidental journalists. It's not just the fact that you're going against traditional media. I really think there's something about the city that's allowing you to do it in this way. So for example, if we were in Toronto, I don't think everyone would know each other in the same way that everyone seems to know people in the audience in this room. So if anyone had comments on that, I'd be very interested to know.
I think I can start off by saying that Illuminescence started out of Hamilton. And again, going back to the great things that Hamilton has to showcase, we've had amazing initiatives coming out of Hamilton. And when I spoke earlier, I said we are telling a local story and trying to use our local successes to build a global connectivity. Because the work we're doing and the stories that we've shared about successful people in Hamilton, and success is very relative. So we're not even looking at success and say this is the definition of success, but saying what is the journey behind this person and what makes them an inspiration that others can learn from. So I think Illuminescence will always remain a Hamilton-focused magazine that really shares the stories and the journeys and successes of people in Hamilton. But because we are on a global platform, which is the internet, there will also be that global connectivity. So it's a great thing for our city. And really, you're absolutely right. All of us here started out in Hamilton, and Hamilton will always be greater for it because the pride comes back to Hamilton. And I think even just sitting here in this room today and sharing these just discussions or just various ways of doing media, again, is a reflection of the community that we have in Hamilton.
I think it's interesting. There's certainly in the last number of years something in the water in Hamilton there's a reemergence. We've heard much about the rise of the new creative class and changing the dynamic of the city. Just one small point. I don't see any of the representatives here against traditional media, against the spec or the spec against. And matter of fact, I'm here tonight taking part because I'm excited and happy to share and learn. And I consider each of the media here competition, but not in a, it's certainly not an angry dog sort of. I watch very closely what Ryan is doing and what Martinez, whose columnists are, and what they're saying, editorial opinions. Joey I consider competition, but I consider it all really healthy. CBC Digital, God bless them, they're competitive. Rick Hughes, I worked with Rick as that in one place for a long time. Frankly, I think it's healthy. There's out of everything I've heard here tonight, there's some platforms that have changed, but the hunger for content hasn't. And that's one thing where I'm confounded in this new world, or doing media differently, or Jeff Bezos, or everything I hear around buzz. It all comes back to good content. And so in some sense, I don't think a lot has changed. You had a question, please.
Just a little context. I'm a media researcher. I work for some of the biggest media companies in the country. And so this conversation is so interesting to me because this is happening in boardrooms in Toronto every single day. And nobody has it quite figured out from what I can tell. And so I found it quite interesting to hear you speak about business models. And I'm wondering what's next for media? Is it doing things with no monetization? People are paying attention. I know that subscriber rates are dropping for print. It's expensive to do. What's next? Paywalls, those don't always work.
If you can answer it, or if anybody wants to answer it and it's successful, we'll hire you on the spot right now, and we'll give you a long-term contract.
It is a good question, and my answer would be everything. Everything, I mean, media entities, big and small, just have to try everything. I was on a panel in New York, a conference that I was involved with, and the Justice Smith was running the Atlantic at the time. He's at Bloomberg now. And I asked him, so you're doing sponsored content, you're doing advertising, they were launching a paid product, a sort of an app that costs money, and I said, what aren't you going to try? And he said, nothing. We're going to try everything. Because none of those things is going to be the sort of magic recipe. You can no longer just sort of hang out a shingle and ads roll in and you cash the checks and go home. I think you do have to It depends on what you're trying to do too. I think part of the future is the kind of model that Joey's trying to do, connecting directly with your audience and having them sponsor you. That's kind of like a paywall, but it's very, very different than the paywall that the Spectator or a large media entity has. It's not that sort of personal connection between, you know, a journalist and the community they're serving.
Matthew, on that, I'm finding, I'm reading obituaries already on Facebook, the death of Facebook. Twitter is too long. Snapchat seems to be in 8 seconds.
This audience here, I would say some people are over 30.
It's just, yeah, I'm over 32. But it's, a lot of the traditional media is like, everyone wants, the older generation is used to the paper. I'm still used to the paper, I enjoy the paper, reading it. But Facebook's 10 years old. It's old, and if I'm 16, I don't want my dad monitoring my mom. They're on Facebook too. They're mad at me because I won't be friends with my grandma who's on Facebook. So now the tweens are doing Snapchat. It's like they're moving away. So, you know, I don't know if Snapchat is kind of like a little peephole into how people are communicating. And earlier on, I saw an instructor with an iPad, and he was filming and taking pictures. More stories are being told through pictures than there are actual writing. You know, it's a way of communicating now. Something like Snapchat is like, hey, how's it going? This is my day. I'm taking these pictures, and that's how they.
How does the Premier then get the story of Hamilton's LRT struggle, or?
Oh, there is no LRT struggle. There's actually a monorail struggle, and Ryan can vouch for that. Ryan's all about the monorail, and Michael Baldessari. Monorail.
Talk to the monorail, I didn't drop my bow tie.
Right. Yeah. But that's like a different generation thing. So I mean, is that how we're going to consume the message now? Through pictures? So eventually something has to come back around to the writing.
I know you've been wait.
Well, over, shout out.
Okay, as an elder, for the first time in history, I could expect to live maybe 20, 30 years past my retirement age. And that's never happened before. And the joy of being an elder is that we want to pass on the world to younger people. One of the problems is that we're disconnected, okay? If anybody wants to know anything, they Google it. They don't come to us anymore. The idea of the role of being an elder is lost, it seems, except for some cultures. So, the Spectator and View has published some of my letters to the editor, but most of the people in my building, they don't buy a newspaper. They want their opinion. They want to consume what's going on. They want to know opinions. They want to be engaged in advocacy. They want to know what the styles are. They want to know about development, etc. They may not buy a newspaper, but they want more content. They also want to be more involved. Okay, they want to give more opinion. And they can give opinion to a very limited extent in the newspapers, to a greater extent through the other platforms. But they don't use those other platforms that much, and they're afraid to do it. So I'm wondering why there can't be more of a synergy between the different platforms where different flavors of content, opinion, style, etc. are offered, and that the newspaper provides a platform, they provide a printing press, they provide the way that can happen. Because my concern is with inclusion, that the people who are 65 and older, they want to see a better world for their children, and they want to be included in that dialogue, and they want the young people to make those decisions, but I guess I'm repeating myself, they want to be included in that. Thank you.
I'd love to speak to that. And just one quick note, I have to catch a plane, so I have to run out. 8:30 is like the absolute latest I can possibly sit. So I think this is actually an answer I was going to give a few minutes ago talking about the future of media is I think the synergies are the future of media. I think it kind of like a car is assembled by like 80 different companies. One company makes the doorknobs, one company makes the headlights, one company. We are going to see that kind of a process happening, I think, in media production where news is being aggregated by all kinds of different sources and by put together to different formats and sent out in different ways. And you know, in Urbanicity, we've published stuff that's been printed published online by CBC, and vice versa. So there has to be sharing, I think. I don't know, you know, if we're mentioning a few massive super media companies, which we already have, that will just simply control everything. But the multiple platforms will always reach multiple people, and the message will always be different in each platform. So that's going to be an ongoing struggle, but I think the silo, you know, the silos rather that we've often had of various media formats and channels and companies, to an extent, for the different formats to survive, will have to drop. They have to work together. That's just the only possible way I see it happening. I know I can say for Urbanicity, inclusion is one of the big things we're worried about. One of the reasons we've looked at going only online. But, you know, my 87-year-old friend in Augusta Seniors Tower is not going to go online. So we're going to keep printing as long as we possibly can.
Great, thank you. You want to head out now?
Yeah, I got it right. I'm so sorry.
Okay. Thank you.
Just a quick plug here. We have some gifts for Alice. I want to say this generously donated by Hamilton Star, located on James North, and Donna, if she's here. There you go. So Donna and Donna have donated a very nice gift bag of Hamilton themed items, and as well as a book by one of the local authors, Sam Campbell, who authored the book Offering 32 as well. Okay, thank you.
Thank you. I was hoping to take more questions. There is a mix and mingle. My understanding the bar is still open. In the interest of getting people home on time and to allow them to talk to our panelists, we'll wrap up. I want to thank everybody for coming on a cold winter night. I especially want to thank Hamilton Media Guild for putting this together. It's exciting. It's exciting. There's a zeal for more, I can tell, and if I know Sherry, there'll be future events. Too bad Martinez has to go, because the next event, he and I are going to debate the coverage of the 2010 election, and well, I meant something that vast coverage. So, thank you, everybody. We'll see you at the floor.